apply supply chain risk management concepts. Welcome to this module on supply chain risk management, or SCRM. In today's interconnected world, organizations rely on third-party vendors, suppliers, and service providers to operate efficiently. However, these external relationships introduce security risks that can impact an organization's infrastructure, data, and reputation. In this lesson, we will cover the key risks associated with supply chains, how to mitigate those risks, and the best practices for securing supply chain operations. Let's begin. Supply chain risk management, SCRM, is the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks associated with suppliers, third-party vendors, and service providers. These risks can include cybersecurity threats, product tampering, counterfeit goods, and lack of compliance with security standards. Organizations must be aware of these major risks when working with third parties. Product tampering, when hardware or software is altered before delivery, potentially introducing backdoors or malware. Counterfeit or low-quality components, fake or substandard products that fail security and performance standards. Implants and unauthorized modifications, hardware or software modifications that introduce security vulnerabilities. Lack of vendor security compliance, suppliers not following proper security protocols, increasing the risk of data breaches. Now, let's look at an example. A company orders network routers from an unknown vendor to cut costs. Later, they discover that the routers contain hidden malware, allowing attackers to steal sensitive data. This is an example of product tampering and unauthorized modifications in the supply chain. Here are some best practices to manage supply chain risks effectively. Verify vendor security practices before signing contracts. Purchase hardware and software only from trusted suppliers. Perform regular security audits on supply chain partners. Implement strict quality control checks on all received products. To reduce risks in the supply chain, organizations must implement strong security controls and monitoring processes. These strategies help organizations secure their supply chains against cyber threats. Third-party assessment and monitoring. Continuously evaluate vendor security practices. Minimum security requirements. Establish baseline security standards that all suppliers must follow. Service-level agreements, SLAs, contracts that define vendor security obligations and performance metrics. Software Bill of Materials, SBOM, a list of software components used in applications to track vulnerabilities. Silicon Root of Trust, using hardware-based security measures to detect unauthorized modifications. Here's an example. A government agency requires all software vendors to provide an SBOM to ensure no malicious components are included in their applications. This helps prevent software supply chain attacks. Here are some best practices for mitigating supply chain security risks. Require vendors to comply with international security standards, e.g. ISO 27001, NIST. Include security requirements in contracts and SLAs. Use endpoint detection tools to monitor third-party software behavior. Verify hardware and software authenticity before deployment. Third-party vendors and contractors play a crucial role in the supply chain, but they also introduce security risks. Organizations must have strict policies for managing vendor access and security compliance. These steps help organizations minimize risks from third-party partners. Vendor risk assessments evaluate potential security risks before selecting a vendor. Security audits and compliance checks regularly review vendor adherence to security policies. Access control management restrict vendor access to only necessary systems and data. Incident response agreements ensure vendors have plans in place for security incidents. Contractual security requirements define legal security obligations in vendor agreements. Now, let's look at an example. A cloud service provider fails to patch a known vulnerability, leading to a data breach. The affected company had a clear SLA with the vendor, requiring them to follow strict patch management policies. Because of this contract, the vendor is held accountable for failing to comply. Here's how to strengthen vendor security management. Conduct security risk assessments before signing vendor contracts. Limit vendor access to the minimum necessary resources. Require third-party security certifications, EGIMS TOT 1. Define penalties for non-compliance in vendor agreements. One of the most well-known supply chain attacks happened in 2020 with SolarWinds. This case highlights why supply chain security is critical. Attackers compromised the SolarWinds Orion IT monitoring platform and inserted a backdoor into software updates. This affected thousands of organizations, including government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Here are some key security controls that could have reduced the impact of the SolarWinds attack. Implement code integrity verification for all software updates. Require multi-factor authentication (MFA) for administrative access. Continuously monitor for suspicious software behavior. Use zero-trust security models to restrict access based on identity and behavior. Now, let's summarize what we've learned about supply chain risk management. Supply chain risks include product tampering, counterfeit goods, and vendor security failures. Organizations must conduct vendor risk assessments and require compliance with security standards. Risk mitigations include SLAs, SBOMs, and hardware authentication methods. Case studies like the SolarWinds attack highlight the need for strict supply chain security measures. By applying these supply chain security concepts, organizations can better protect their infrastructure and data from third-party risks. This concludes our module on supply chain risk management. Up next, security awareness, education, and training programs. Stay secure.